Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo. This week I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. I'm starting this video editing early in the week, so I'm trying to get a little bit ahead so hopefully we can leave on time. And I don't know if I'm going to get done this week with the water tank project, but that is the goal. So grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's see what happens together. My first job this week was to get the tanks and lids as prepped as possible so that I could get all of the painting done. The epoxy coating does require 3 coats with a day to dry in between. So I wanted to get everything ready so I could get there in the morning and get 1 coat on, and then I'd be able to do it 3 days in a row and just knock it out. So this first day I'm just getting everything ready, and that started with rubbing down the tanks with a solvent to get out any particulate or debris. And I realized I was never going to get these tanks perfect. I had been scraping at them for a week, and I just had to say enough is enough. There are so many corners and cracks and crevices. I realized that I never was going to get it perfect. So I just relented and said, this is what it's going to be. So that's where we're at with the tanks. After rubbing down the tanks, I turned on a couple of fans to get some airflow through the cabin and opened up some hatches. That solvent really didn't smell that good, but it's airing out, so that's good. So I went up top and started working on the lids. I had the metal frame that went around the edge of the lids, but I did have to drill all the holes for the bolts to go through so I could attach it to the tank itself. Since the water in the tanks, even though it's fresh water, it will have a little bit of chlorine that I'll add to it. Probably around 10 ppm is where I'll try and keep it, and that's just to inhibit any bacterial growth. At 10 ppm, it shouldn't be too corrosive to 316 stainless, which is what I'm going to be using for the nuts and bolts. I did look into using Hastelloy C276, which is a different steel alloy, and it's very, very resistant to chlorine corrosion. And unfortunately, those bolts were over $75 a piece, and I think I'm going to use around 40 of them, so I didn't want to spend a couple $1,000s on bolts when I could get them for, I don't know, 20 bucks at Home Depot, where I actually ordered them through McMaster Car, but that's neither here nor there. 316 should last several years, and it makes more sense to change them out once every few years than to invest in Hastelloy bolts. After drilling all the holes for the bolts, I had to install a couple of inspection ports into each lid. As you may have noticed, inside of each water tank there is a fiberglass divider. The water can move between the 2 sides of the tank, not the 2 tanks themselves, but the 2 small tanks within each tank. And that's just to prevent water from moving back and forth. It is a structural divider, and it also prevents a lot of sloshing and motion. So at least that's why I'm assuming those are there. So I did need to install 2 inspection ports, and in Frank's old lids, he had just used a couple of deck plates for each lid, and I just did the same thing. I am using 100% silicone sealant to seal in the deck plates and number 8 pan head screws to hold the deck plates in place. I have only been showing the construction of one side of the lid, and of course I had to do the exact same on the opposite side. And on the first go around with the silicone, naturally I got it all over my pants. Which, that's me, and I figured out a way to avoid that the second time around, so woohoo! So my plan of attack for getting her done, since the old lids had the aluminum rail that went around the inside of the tanks, that surface is a little bit rough, and even though I sanded it down, there is some raw fiberglass in there. And I don't think tape will stick to the bottom very well, so I can fill the old screw holes with epoxy. I want to fill those holes because they could become harborage points for bacterial growth, so I want to make sure to get those tanks as sealed as I can. And with the new lid, those are 1/4-inch bolts that are going to be going through, so I'm going to drill just into the surface of the fiberglass. Then I'm going to remove the lids. Once I have that template of where the bolt locations are going to be, I'm going to actually drill those out with either 3/8 or 1/2-inch holes, and then I'm going to fill those with epoxy, and then come back and re-drill them out with 1/4-inch. That way any water that gets in there, the fiberglass is protected by a layer of epoxy. The product that I'll be using to coat the fiberglass water tanks is a Sherwin-Williams product. It's called Macropoxy 646PW. And it is an epoxy paint, so it is a binary liquid like most epoxies. It is a 1-to-1 mix ratio. There are a lot of potable water epoxies that are available to industry, and those are normally sold in tote sizes, so like around 350-400 gallons. And those are used to coat like the inside of steel ships, or water towers, that kind of stuff. So they're sold in very large quantities. One of the only ones that's available over the counter in small quantities is this product by Sherwin-Williams. And it is not perfect for this application. In the literature, they do recommend using it on tanks 1,500 gallons or larger, and my tanks are only 35 gallons in size. And I'm sure that has to do with a surface area to water ratio to get the volatile organics low enough that it's safe to drink. Now, I don't plan on drinking water out of these tanks for quite a long time, and this is the same coating that Frank had used in the past, and they used it for drinking water, and they're still alive, so I'm not too worried about it. I know it'll probably be 8 to 9 months before I'm in a situation where I might have to drink out of the tank, so I've got some time to break them in and get some of those VOCs out of there. Normally when painting I would paint from the bottom up, but in this case I decided to do it the messy way from the top down. And the reason why I did that is if there were any flakes or chips that came off that I missed during scraping, I figured they could fall to the bottom and it would give me one more opportunity to vacuum out the bottom before I painted it, so that no chips got embedded into the new epoxy. I do really like the in-tank shots, but I had to remove the camera pretty quickly because it was becoming obvious that this was going to be a huge mess. And I actually have some epoxy paint on my GoPro. Thankfully, none of it's on the lens, so life is good. A mirror came in handy for looking up underneath the rim of the tanks, and surprisingly, the fumes were not too bad. I had a little bit of a headache that night, but I believe it was more due to dehydration than the actual fumes themselves, so it actually wasn't too bad. Once I got the tanks coated, I decided to go ahead and rough up the plywood lids and give those a coat of epoxy as well. The pot time on this epoxy is around 4 hours, and I was maybe 3 hours in at this point, and the epoxy was starting to thicken up, so I went ahead and got that done as quick as possible. This is coat number 1 of 3, so I do need to put 2 more coats on, and Frank gave me a really neat tip for the second coat. He said to add a little bit of lamp black, which is like a charcoal powder, to the epoxy for the second coat, and that gives it just an off-white color, so you can actually see where you've coated, so you make sure to get a good second coat, which is a great idea. So I might show a little bit of that, but I'm going to skip a lot of the rest of this, so I'm not sure where we'll end this because I just finished the first coat today, so I guess we'll find out together. Here you can see the tanks after the second coat had been applied, and you can see the off-white color due to the charcoal pigment that was added. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but I did decide to break this tank project up into 3 different videos for a couple of reasons. One is I don't like these videos to be more than around 10 minutes, and we're already running over that. And B, this project turned out to have a lot more steps than I was expecting. So there is a whole nother video's worth of material for those of you that are curious how it all worked out. And C, I am getting ready to leave soon, and you guys are only maybe real time like a week and a half behind where I'm actually at. So it'd be nice to have a couple of videos already uploaded when I leave, and that'll give me a couple of weeks to find internet when I am actually traveling, because it can be a little bit challenging to find internet to upload new videos, so that'll give me a little bit of a buffer. So I hate to do it to you, I'm sorry, but there will be a part 3 to this. I'd like to give a massive shout out to our Patreon crew. You guys make these videos possible. Without your support, I wouldn't even bother making them, so thank you so much. It means the world to me. And our Patreon crew is Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Joan and Jim Linbo, Sherry Erickson, Genesis Ava Linbo, and Deb Schall. Thank you guys so much. If you're interested in becoming a member of our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below. And that'll give you access to our Patreon page where we have extra bonus videos. We've got photos. There's over several hundred items in there by now. And I try and post something every day when I'm traveling. And you would also help support the channel, which would be awesome. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe, because that helps us out a ton as well. Alrighty, see y'all next week.